What hasn't been said already about Kony 2012, I think, is really looking at the role of charity organizations or non governmental organizations um, on the continent of Africa and in populations where there is high poverty and high oppression and um, of African people. If African people were to have or regain resources and were able to use their resources for themselves, it will put a whole bunch of charity organizations out of business tomorrow. You see, that's why charity organizations don't help. That's why they don't really solve any issues or really raise criticism of the thing that really causes the contradiction in the first place. You see, there are places like Invisible, organizations like Invisible Children can go in and talk about all of the bad things that Joseph Kony has done, talk about the children, and talk about, what we need to do as a population on the earth to stop this one warlord who is doing all of these things to children, which, as a matter of fact, isn't really going on today, as reported by many people who can actually just Google shit. Um, but if that's going to solve the problem, that we could really help these children, really help save more kids from being hurt and harmed, and the terror that is happening because Joseph Kony is alive today. And the reality is that stopping this one person is not going to change anything. Stopping, and there's hundreds of Joseph Konys across the continent of Africa. There's hundreds of Joseph Konys within the United States. Let's be real. There's hundreds of Joseph Konys everywhere in the damn world, and I find it really horrible that people on the list that says the international terror list uh, is comprised mostly of brown and black people. Yet, and it is a list that is created by imperialist nations, which almost guarantees that their faces and their names will never ever see the light of day on these lists. But just looking at what charity does, it doesn't really help, and it only really thrives off of the misery and the wretchedness of the communities in which they purport to help. And in many cases, even though they have the label of non-governmental organization, many of them are a part of the government. Many of them work because they're funded by the government. And in many cases, they do reconnaissance for the government. Whether they believe they are or not, they are doing exactly that, reporting on the situations on the ground, what's happening, who are, what is the problems, and reporting it back to their superiors, who then might have some ties with the government of the United States or England or France or whatever other imperialist nations are really on the ground militarily in Africa. And I know that we all saw Avatar, and how quickly we forget that the very clear message of this movie was imperialism. Um, so uh, it's really really important that we tie that message into what's happening with Kony, this campaign to get Kony in 2012. This video and this mission is very clear in that it is calling for U.S. military invasion, U.S. military occupation, U.S. military support of a very tyrannical neo-colonial leadership of the country of Uganda, which is responsible for millions of deaths, which is responsible for the continued theft of the resources of the country, is continued to destabilize any peace in the region, and yet they go after this one insignificant, and I'm saying insignificant in comparison to the leadership of the country. And this charity, and now we've put this charity organization in a place where they're able to galvanize support, not for their own organization, but they're actually gathering support that the U.S. intervene, U.S. invade and cause more death, murder, and mayhem. And if we're talking about an army or militia base of children, then they're causing more death of these children. And there's nothing that's going to be helped out of that. And I think it's important that we identify that role, that these charity organizations, wherever they may be based, are based on their existence, their ability to gain resources is based on them reporting back the misery and wretchedness of African people. And it's not until we gain control of our resources, it's not until we gain a unified and communicative Africa that is based on using our resources for us, that we will not see these types of organizations getting millions of dollars and making millions of dollars off of our misery and our wretchedness. And I think that that's important to say, that none of these organizations have helped. None of these organizations are doing anything to really empower the people or give them voice. And even as they purport to say that their name of the organization is Invisible Children, invisible to whom? Invisible to white people? Invisible to the white person's son who was doing the video? I'm sure that the children were not invisible to the people of Uganda. I'm sure that the children were not invisible to the people of Sierra Leone. The children were not invisible to the people of nearby countries and the refugee communities that have been created into different countries based on the unrest that was happening in that large mass in Uganda about 6 years ago. So it's an arrogance. It's a level of not allowing the people to speak for themselves. It's an arrogance of you telling a story based on your own white mind of how you think a story should be told. The people of Uganda, the people of Africa have their own voice. The people of Africa have been working tirelessly to solve their own problems. And instead of you empowering that, instead of you giving voice to what's already being done, they call for military involvement from the U.S. and you people are just in support of that blindly. Many of you were opposed to the U.S. invasion of Libya. Many of you were opposed to the U.S. invasion of Iran and Iraq. And when it comes to dark Africa, you have no problems, you have no questions at all about who the boogeyman is and what needs to be done. There's no critical assessment. There's no stop and let me analyze the situation before you gung-ho behind it. And that's the danger of charity organizations, because charity gives you the idea that you are doing something good. Because their face is not a gun. So it gives you the illusion that you're doing something good. And instead, here we are, face that this charity is really purporting violence, military occupation, and this is how charities are dangerous and now we're seeing them being used at a higher level to really invade and utilize support for the conquer, the invasion, the destabilization of countries in Africa. And one of the things that I really understood about being in Africa and visiting, and just for my week there, is how closed off African people are just for different regions of their own country, and not having access to what's going on in countries outside of them, and how closed off and how communication is just closed down. And that's not by accident. It's important that rulers and leaders are put in place to continue to not want to develop their countries in order to get to the standards of living like everybody else on the planet. If African people understood that what's happening to them in their region or their city or their country or their village happened also last year in this country, in this region, and in this place on the continent of Africa, if they understood that this is a continuing process over and over and over again, I think there will be a different type of response, a different type of awareness on the continent of Africa. And one of the things that I think that really needs to be solved is the access to technology, access to communication, access to just basic electricity, because Africa is one of the darkest continents on the planet, and it's not by mistake. And so here we have this charity organization access to technology abound, informing the world population who have access also to technology about what's going on in this country, and then the people themselves not knowing about what's happening and what's being said about them as they're in this country, and the entire population not really having access to the things that we have. So there continues to be this sort of dialogue that's happening about Africa and not including the Africans themselves in the discussion. And it's not until you have Africans who are outside of the country, who live in imperialist nations like the United States and UK and other places, that can give a voice to what's happening there. But I think had Ugandans or a large majority of people in Africa have access to the things that we do, living in imperialist nations, that they would have a different understanding of what needs to be done. And Kony 2012 would never have the opportunity to make videos and make videos and films and documentaries and stories about the plight of African people. African peoples themselves can report and tell you what's really going on in such a way that will really not allow these type of gross insidiousness to happen in a way that is happening right now. So charity is bad. Support self-empowerment, support self-sufficiency, support development, grassroots developments that are happening in Africa. Absolutely do not support any organization who cannot show that the people themselves have the power in what is being done for themselves or on their behalf. If you would like to support an organization that is about empowering African people, please visit developmentforafrica.org or visit our YouTube channel, Apdap Uhuru. Please also support the Africa's Future and African Hands Tour, which is set to start in April of 2012, where Nurse Mary of Sierra Leone will be visiting the United States. Uhuru.